Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
TTS, the Deep Dive Episode 2026-0430.
Imagine, just for a second, a 50-foot snake hunting in a dense, sweltering jungle.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right, now imagine that same prehistoric jungle is actually a sinking modern metropolis.
Built directly over a tearing tectonic plate,
Exactly. And while the ground physically collapses, the people above are arguing over the legal rights to read your mind, or at least read your digital data.
I mean, it is just wild.
It is. Today, we aren't just talking about a changing world. We are looking at a planet that is literally, politically, and biologically mutating under our feet.
It is the absolute definition of a dynamic, unpredictable system. We like our geopolitical boundaries and our coastlines to be visible, to be categorized, and to be fixed.
Yeah, we like things neat and tidy.
Exactly. But the data coming in from across the globe right now shatters that illusion entirely.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us, our mission is to take you on a massive, comprehensive journey. We are going to span the hidden depths of our shifting planet, the cutting-edge frontiers of medicine and artificial intelligence, the incredibly complex web of global geopolitics, and finally, the farthest reaches of the cosmos.
We have pulled together an incredible array of recent reporting, scientific journals, and global data sets from major news outlets.
And the goal is simple, right?
To make you the most well-informed person in the room on these topics without overwhelming you with the noise. We're going to connect the dots between events that might seem completely unrelated on the surface.
But they are actually part of a much larger global narrative.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are starting with the concept of boundaries and authority breaking down. Let's look at the geopolitical earthquake happening right now in the energy sector. The United Arab Emirates, located in the Middle East, has just announced it is leaving the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, better known as OPEC. And this is after almost 6 decades of membership.
Yeah, to really understand the magnitude of this, you have to look at how OPEC actually functions.
Right.
For over half a century, OPEC has operated as a collective cartel. Member nations sit in a room and agree to artificially coordinate their oil production levels.
So if they want global oil prices to go up, they all agree to pump less oil.
Exactly, creating a scarcity. And if they want prices to drop, they flood the market. The United Arab Emirates has been a massive cornerstone of this group.
So their exit is a huge deal.
It represents a fundamental, almost tectonic pivot toward individualism in energy markets.
Wait, back up. Why now? I mean, if this cartel system has made these member nations incredibly wealthy for 60 years, what is the underlying mechanism driving the UAE to suddenly jump ship?
Well, it comes down to national economic diversification and production flexibility. The UAE has invested billions in expanding its own oil production capacity. But under OPEC's strict quotas, they aren't allowed to actually use that capacity.
Oh, so they are essentially leaving money in the ground.
Precisely. By breaking away, they are prioritizing their own sovereign ability to pump as much as they want when they want, regardless what the rest of the cartel desires.
Wow.
Yeah, they are breaking historical reliance on collective agreements to secure their own future in a world that is slowly transitioning away from fossil fuels.
And the timing of this is wild because global energy markets are already a massive pressure cooker. I mean, we're seeing oil prices surging to 4-year highs right now.
We are.
And a lot of that is tied directly to physical borders, specifically a massive standoff between the United States and Iran over the Strait of Hormuz.
Right, and for geographical context, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman.
It's a huge choke point.
It is arguably the most critical maritime choke point in the entire world for global energy transport. Roughly a fifth of the world's total oil consumption passes through that narrow stretch of water.
That is staggering.
So we're looking at a situation where the United States is currently weighing a very tense Iranian proposal.
Right. Iran has basically offered to keep the Strait of Hormuz open and safe for commercial transit.
Yeah.
But their non-negotiable condition is that the U.S. must lift its current blockade and conclude military operations in the region.
Yeah.
And the ripple effects of this standoff are just massive. I was reading a report from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO, and they showed a 95% collapse in ship traffic in that region since late February. A 95% drop.
It is almost a total standstill.
Yeah, and we aren't just talking about crude oil here. We're talking about millions of tons of fertilizers and agricultural supplies being completely halted.
And the FAO is warning this is a direct threat to global food security. It really highlights the profound fragility of our global supply chains.
Right, everything is connected.
Exactly. A bottleneck in the Middle East doesn't just raise the price of gasoline for you when you commute to work. It fundamentally disrupts the agricultural planting cycles in regions halfway across the world that desperately rely on those specific fertilizers.
Wow.
Without fertilizer, crop yields plummet. When crop yields plummet, global food prices skyrocket.
And while this diplomatic and economic standoff paralyzes global shipping, the situation is actually escalating militarily.
Yeah.
Reporting indicates that the United States Central Command is concurrently briefing President Donald Trump on potential options for brief, decisive military strikes in the region.
It's a high-wire act. One miscalculation and a localized blockade becomes a regional conflict with massive global economic consequences.
It is a perfect storm of diplomacy, economics, and military strategy.
It really is. But the breakdown of traditional authority isn't just happening in international water.
Oh, definitely not.
The political and legal landscape inside the United States is going through its own massive redefinition right now, particularly at the Supreme Court of the United States, or a SCOTUS.
Yeah, there are two major cases the court is grappling with right now that touch on fundamental aspects of American civil liberties and executive power. Let's start with the digital privacy case, because this one feels incredibly dystopian.
It really does.
The Supreme Court is deeply divided over the use of what law enforcement calls geofence search warrants.
This is a fascinating, highly complex intersection of modern technology and constitutional law. To understand a geofence warrant, you really have to understand how big tech companies store your data.
Right.
Companies like Google maintain massive databases. Google's is known internally as the Sensor Vault, which tracks the incredibly precise location data of hundreds of millions of mobile devices.
Okay.
A geofence warrant allows law enforcement to compel these tech companies to provide location data for every single device that was present within a specific geographic area during a specific time frame.
So instead of a detective going to a judge and saying, hey, we have probable cause that John Doe robbed this bank, we need a warrant for his phone.
Exactly.
They just draw a digital circle on a map around the bank for the hour the robbery happened and ask the tech company, give us the anonymous data of every single person who was inside this circle.
And then they sift through it to find a suspect.
I mean, if you're listening to this right now while grabbing a coffee and a crime happens next door, your phone's location data could legally be swept up in a police dragnet. That's what's at stake here.
That is the exact mechanism. Now, from a law enforcement perspective, and this is the argument presented by those prioritizing public safety and victim advocacy, these warrants are an invaluable, thoroughly modern investigative tool.
Sure.
The argument from the right and from law enforcement agencies emphasizes that criminals are using modern technology to coordinate and hide.
Right. They aren't using payphones anymore.
Exactly. They argue that in cases like kidnappings, terrorist attacks, or unsolved murders where there are zero traditional leads, a geofence warrant is sometimes the absolute only way to identify a suspect and protect the public.
But the pushback on this is fierce. Civil rights organizations leaning on traditional interpretations of the Fourth Amendment are sounding the alarm.
Yeah, they are.
Because the Fourth Amendment was specifically designed to prevent general warrants, which the British used during colonial times to just search anyone and everyone in an area without specific suspicion.
Exactly. The civil liberties argument, often championed by groups on the political left as well as libertarian groups on the right, is that sweeping up the location data of dozens or hundreds of innocent bystanders without individualized probable cause is a fundamental violation of privacy.
It essentially flips the burden of proof, making you a minor suspect simply by geographical coincidence.
Right. The justices on the court are really struggling with this because they're having to apply 18th century constitutional text written in the era of muskets and quill pens to 21st century smartphone tracking networks.
And that's just one of the massive cases on the docket. The Supreme Court is also weighing President Trump's bid to end temporary protected status, or TPS,
Right.
specifically for immigrants from countries like Haiti in the Caribbean and Syria in the Middle East.
This issue similarly presents two very distinct, deeply held political and legal philosophies.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Well, the administration's position, generally supported by conservative proponents of stricter immigration enforcement, is rooted strictly in executive authority and the literal definition of the law. They argue that temporary protected status was legislated to be exactly what it says, temporary.
Meaning, if an earthquake devastates Haiti, the U.S. offers temporary haven. But decades later, the administration argues the immediate crisis is over.
Correct. Their perspective is that once the initial disaster or conflict in a designated country has subsided, or after a certain period of years, the executive branch has the authority and the mandate to revoke that status to maintain the integrity of the immigration system.
Right.
They argue that blurring the line between temporary disaster relief and permanent residency basically undermines the rule of law.
But the opposing viewpoint, which is heavily championed by progressive lawmakers, immigration advocates, and the affected communities themselves, focuses on the on-the-ground humanitarian realities.
Yes.
They argue that conditions in places like Haiti and Syria remain highly unstable, deeply impoverished, and fundamentally dangerous.
The progressive argument is that stripping this protection from thousands of people who have established lives, bought homes, paid taxes, and raised American-born children over the course of many years, only to deport them back to active crisis zones, is fundamentally unjust and cruel.
It is a profound debate.
It really is. It asks the court to define the absolute limits of the president's executive power, while simultaneously navigating the moral obligations a nation has to vulnerable populations that have been legally residing within its borders for years.
It really feels like the legal system is being pushed to its absolute limits right now. And speaking of the limits of executive power and the First Amendment, we have to talk about the latest news from the Department of Justice, the DOJ.
Oh, right. This one is unique.
Yeah, they just secured a new indictment against former FBI Director James Comey. And the basis of this federal indictment is an Instagram post featuring a seashell.
Huh. I know it sounds almost absurd at first glance, but the legal arguments underneath it are actually quite serious, and they touch on the very core of free speech versus national security.
Okay.
Officials driving the indictment claim that this specific social media post, due to its context and timing, implied a coded threat against President Trump.
Walk me through the actual legal logic the DOJ is trying to use here. Because to a layman like me, prosecuting someone over a picture of a seashell sounds completely unconstitutional.
I get that.
How does a seashell equal threat to the commander-in-chief?
Well, the perspective supporting the indictment, generally coming from the administration and its allies, relies on the concept of stochastic terrorism, or veiled threats from individuals with massive platforms.
Okay, so it's about the reach they have.
Exactly. They argue that public figures, especially former high-ranking intelligence officials who have vast followings and understand operational security, must be held accountable for communications that could be reasonably construed by their followers as threatening or inciting violence against the president.
So they frame this not as a speech issue, but as a strict matter of executive protection and national security.
Precisely.
Oh my gosh, I have to admit, the surreal nature of this is almost hard to process.
It's a lot.
We have a global economic shift hinging on a massive maritime blockade in the Middle East, happening at the exact same time as a federal indictment over a beach photo on Instagram.
Yeah.
But the counterargument here has to be rooted in the First Amendment, right? I mean, if you can indict someone for a vague post, where does it stop?
The counter-perspective, heavily emphasized by civil liberties advocates, legal scholars, and critics of the administration, is exactly that. They argue this is a wildly dangerous infringement on free speech and creative expression.
Right.
They argue that prosecuting a vague, non-explicit social media post as a criminal threat sets a chilling precedent for all Americans. They view the indictment not as a genuine security measure, but as a politically motivated weaponization of the justice system, designed to silence a high-profile, vocal critic of the president.
So, taking a step back here, when you look at the United Arab Emirates breaking away from OPEC's centralized control, the U.S. navigating these incredibly complex domestic battles over executive authority versus individual privacy, and the global standoffs over maritime trade routes, are we seeing a global trend where individual national or even personal interests are completely overriding collective agreements?
We are witnessing a profound fragmentation. The post-World War II era was largely defined by building massive multilateral institutions designed to keep order. OPEC, the United Nations, broad global trade agreements.
Right.
What the data suggests now is a rapid pivot toward bilateralism, unilateral action, and decentralization. Countries, and even distinct political factions within those countries, are prioritizing immediate, specific interests over broader, abstract collective stability.
Wow.
The societal and political fault lines of human organization are shifting rapidly.
And speaking of shifting fault lines, we aren't just dealing with political and economic shifts. The literal physical fault lines of our planet are doing the exact same thing.
They really are.
Let's move into our second segment, our dynamic planet. Because while we are arguing over borders on a map, the map itself is tearing apart.
This is where the science becomes incredibly visceral. Geologists using advanced seismic imaging have made a startling discovery beneath the Pacific Northwest of the United States.
Okay.
They have found that the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate is actively splitting apart as it subducts or slides beneath the North American plate.
Okay, let's unpack the physics of this, because the plate is splitting apart sounds like the premise of a Hollywood disaster movie.
It does.
First of all, seismic imaging is basically like taking a giant planetary sonogram, right?
That is a brilliant analogy. When an earthquake happens, it sends seismic waves rippling through the Earth. By placing sensors all over the surface and measuring exactly how long it takes those waves to travel through different layers of rock, scientists can mathematically map the structures deep underground.
So they can see what's going on down there.
Yeah, they can see where rock is dense and cold and where it is hot and molten.
And what they saw looking at the Juan de Fuca plate was that it wasn't just smoothly sliding under the continent.
No, it is disintegrating. The Juan de Fuca plate is a massive slab of oceanic crust. As it gets pushed deeper into the Earth's mantle beneath Washington and Oregon, it encounters unimaginable heat and pressure.
Right.
The geological physics at play here involve thermal stresses and something called slab pull. The bottom of the plate is getting hot and trying to become pliable, while the top is still relatively cold and brittle.
Oh, wow. So they're fighting each other.
Exactly. The tension between those states, combined with the sheer gravitational weight of the plate pulling itself down, is causing massive vertical tears in the rock. It is tearing like a piece of cold taffy being stretched too far.
Which is terrifying, but also scientifically fascinating, because it completely changes how we understand the risk of the Cascadia subduction zone.
It does.
Which is the fault line that creates massive earthquakes in that region. But it's not just deep underground where the Earth is changing shape. We have new data from space, specifically from the NISAR satellite, which is a joint mission between NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization. This satellite data shows that Mexico City in Mexico is sinking.
Yeah, rapidly.
And not just a little bit. It is sinking at an extreme rate of ½ an inch per month.
½ an inch a month is catastrophic for urban infrastructure. To understand how they know this, we have to look at the tech.
Okay.
The NISAR satellite uses synthetic aperture radar. Unlike traditional optical cameras that need sunlight and clear skies, radar sends a microwave pulse down to the Earth and measures the reflection.
So it bounces a signal back.
Exactly. By passing over the exact same spot on Earth repeatedly and measuring the microscopic phase shift in the returning radar waves, they can measure changes in the Earth's surface down to fractions of an inch, completely ignoring weather or cloud cover.
The precision is mind-blowing. But the physics of why Mexico City is sinking is what gets me. It's like a giant metropolitan sponge being squeezed dry.
Historically, the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, which became modern Mexico City, was built on an island in Lake Texcoco.
Over centuries, the lake was drained to expand the city.
So the entire city, home to over 20 million people, is resting on an ancient, highly compressible clay lake bed. And as the city grows, they need water, so they pump it out of the underground aquifers.
And that is the exact mechanism of subsidence. When you extract the groundwater, you remove the hydraulic pressure that is helping to hold the microscopic grains of soil and clay apart.
Oh, I see.
Without that water pressure, the weight of the massive city above simply crushes the soil together. It compresses.
Wow.
½ an inch a month might not sound like much, but over a decade, that's ½ a foot. You think about the rigid subway systems, the municipal plumbing, the deep foundations of skyscrapers. The physical reality of the city is collapsing in on itself due to sheer human extraction.
We are learning that the ground we build on is far more fluid and fragile than we ever assumed. And this environmental reality is being compounded by extreme weather happening above ground.
Yes.
The climate extremes we are seeing reported globally are just relentless. We are seeing systemic shocks to the global climate system. A new comprehensive report out of Europe details that the continent saw an estimated 63,000 heat-related deaths in a recent severe heat wave.
63,000, that is just devastating.
It is, alongside massive droughts that literally crippled commercial river systems like the Rhine.
The water levels dropped so low that cargo ships couldn't pass. which again ties back to those fragile global supply chains we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
And it's hitting agriculture violently. North Korea in East Asia is facing extreme food shortages right now because an unprecedented drought is threatening their primary crops.
Yeah.
And on the exact flip side of the hydrological coin, Bangladesh in South Asia is bracing for heavy, unprecedented rains that threaten to completely wipe out their vital rice harvest. It feels like every corner of the globe is dealing with a severe extreme.
These events are no longer isolated anomalies. The combination of intensely elevated global temperatures and violently disrupted water cycles, whether it manifests as far too much water in Bangladesh or far too little in Europe and North Korea. Right. It directly threatens baseline human survival and global agricultural stability. However, the sheer scale of these extreme events is finally acting as a catalyst.
How so?
It is accelerating policy shifts and cutting through decades of diplomatic bureaucracy.
Well, we are seeing some positive movement. Data shows Brazil in South America is actually leading a decline in global rainforest destruction right now.
That's a huge win.
It is. The government has made real, measurable progress in curbing illegal logging and deforestation in the Amazon. Though climate scientists do warn that the current El Niño weather pattern, which brings naturally drier conditions to the region, could spark massive wildfires that threaten to undo that progress overnight.
And on the international policy front, we just saw 57 nations meet at the Santa Marta Summit in Colombia, South America.
Okay.
This was a critical, high-level meeting aimed at kickstarting a binding global phase-out of fossil fuels.
Wow, that's significant.
It is a direct response to both the geopolitical energy volatility we discussed with OPEC and the visceral climate realities we are experiencing. This aligns perfectly with a major announcement from France and Europe, which just unveiled a comprehensive, legally binding roadmap to completely exit all fossil fuels, meaning oil, natural gas, and coal, by the year 2050.
This is where I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sir, go ahead.
We have this unbelievable technology. We have satellites like NISAR that can measure the ground sinking by fractions of an inch from orbit. We have global summits and ambitious roadmaps for 2050.
Right.
But are we actually capable of using this incredible data to coordinate and reverse these trends, or are we just highly informed, high-definition spectators to our own environmental crisis?
That is arguably the defining challenge of the 21st century. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have moved from an era defined by a lack of data to an era overwhelmed by an abundance of it. The friction is no longer in the science. The friction is entirely in human behavior, legacy economics, and political will. Understanding the physics of a tectonic plate tearing, or mapping the subsidence of a sinking city, gives us the theoretical power to adapt.
Right.
It allows us to build better early warning systems, to redesign urban water extraction, to transition energy grids. But knowing how to do it and actually doing it are vastly different things.
Which makes me wonder how our ancestors handled these things. Did they adapt, or did they just collapse?
That's a great question.
Which is the perfect entry into our third segment, unearthing the past and hacking biology. Because scientists aren't just looking down from space. They are digging into the ocean floor and unearthing exactly how ancient humans solved complex engineering problems.
Yeah, in the Adriatic Sea, which is a body of water separating the Italian peninsula from the Balkans, maritime archaeologists have been studying a fascinating find.
What did they find?
The Ilivic Parcine 1, a 2,200-year-old Roman shipwreck. For a long time, the exact chemical methods ancient shipbuilders used to protect their wooden vessels from the corrosive effects of seawater and wood-boring marine organisms were a mystery.
Right, because you can't just put bare wood in the ocean and expect it to last.
Exactly.
But using modern chemical analysis, mass spectrometry, they found out the Romans were basically waterproofing their ships using a highly specific engineered mixture of pine tar and beeswax.
Yes, the chemistry is remarkably sophisticated. The pine tar acts as a natural biocide, deterring organisms from eating the wood, while the beeswax provides a hydrophobic, water-repellent seal.
That's brilliant.
But the truly brilliant forensic discovery was what they found trapped inside that ancient waterproofing coating.
Okay.
Scientists found microscopic, perfectly preserved grains of pollen.
It's like an ancient microscopic GPS tracker.
Exactly. Plant species are hyperlocal. By genetically analyzing the specific types of pollen embedded in the tar, they can match those plants to very specific regions of the Mediterranean coast. It allows archaeologists to tell exactly which ports the ship visited for repairs based on the local flora blowing in the wind on the day the tar was applied. It traces their ancient trade routes with stunning precision.
I love that. And this same application of advanced chemical forensics is being used to solve modern, multi-million-dollar art crimes.
It is.
Just recently, a stolen, headless bronze statue of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius was repatriated from the Cleveland Museum of Art in Ohio, United States, back to its rightful home in Turkey.
This statue was valued at around $20 million. It had been sitting on display in the museum for nearly 6 decades. The Turkish government had long suspected it was looted during an illicit excavation in the 1960s.
But proving it was incredibly difficult. How did they finally definitively prove it was stolen?
Through a process called metallurgical fingerprinting. Bronze is an alloy, primarily copper and tin, but ancient bronze always contains trace impurities, lead, zinc, arsenic, that vary depending on exactly where the raw ore was mined. By taking a microscopic sample of the statue and analyzing its unique elemental composition, scientists matched its chemical signature definitively to the specific signature of bronze artifacts found at a known looted archaeological site in Buban, Turkey.
The chemistry of the past literally solved the crime of the present.
It did.
It is incredible how the Earth holds on to these secrets, although sometimes digging into the past reveals things straight out of a horror movie. Paleontologists in India just discovered the fossilized remains of an ancient snake called Vasuki indicus. It lived about 47 million years ago, and based on the vertebrae they found, it was roughly 50 feet long.
It is a staggering biological specimen. To put that in perspective, that is longer than a standard school bus.
That is just horrifying.
A 50-foot apex predator highlights the extreme evolutionary paths biology can take given the right environmental conditions. During the Middle Eocene epoch, 47 million years ago, global temperatures were significantly higher than they are today. Snakes, being cold-blooded ectotherms, are limited in their maximum body size by the ambient temperature of their environment. A hotter planet literally allowed them to grow to monstrous proportions.
A school bus-sized snake is terrifying, but it might actually be tied for weirdest biological discovery this week with something scientists are simply calling ship goo.
Yes. The official designation is Ship Go 01.
Right. Researchers were doing routine dry dock maintenance on a Great Lakes research vessel in North America, and they found this thick, black, tar-like substance oozing out of the inside of the ship's steel rudder shaft.
Yeah.
We are talking about a completely sealed environment with almost zero oxygen, no sunlight, and no obvious biological nutrients. And when they took a sample to the lab and tested it, they realized the goo was alive.
It was teeming with a completely undocumented species of extremophile bacteria.
Yeah.
Extremophiles are organisms that thrive in physical or geochemical conditions that are detrimental to most life on Earth.
So they just live where nothing else can.
Exactly. The discovery of Ship Go 01 forces marine biologists to completely rethink the parameters of where life can take hold. If life can adapt to chemically break down and thrive inside the synthetic steel mechanics of a rudder shaft, it demonstrates an astonishing level of biological resilience.
Life truly finds a way. And speaking of biological resilience and adaptation, human medicine is taking some massive, paradigm-shifting leaps forward right now. We are moving from simply observing biology to actively, precisely hacking it.
We really are.
For instance, researchers are making serious clinical headway on a male birth control pill.
This has been considered the holy grail of reproductive medicine for decades. Historically, attempting to create a male contraceptive using hormonal approaches, essentially trying to suppress testosterone to halt sperm production, resulted in severe physical and psychological side effects.
Right.
It caused mood swings, weight gain, and depression, which led to very low acceptance rates in clinical trials.
But this new approach completely bypasses the hormonal system.
The mechanism is actually quite elegant. It works by temporarily inhibiting a specific enzyme called soluble adenyl cyclase, or SAC.
Okay.
This enzyme is basically the on switch that controls a sperm cell's flagellum, its tail. The drug essentially hits the pause button on the sperm's mechanical ability to swim, completely paralyzing them.
Wow.
And it does this rapidly and temporarily without permanently altering the body's delicate endocrine or hormonal balance.
The societal implications of an effective, on-demand, non-hormonal male pill are just huge. For all of modern history, the physical burden, the hormonal side effects, and the psychological stress of chemical birth control have fallen almost entirely on women.
Yes.
A reliable male pill could fundamentally reshape gender roles, family planning dynamics, and the shared responsibilities of reproduction globally.
It absolutely could. And we are seeing similar hyper-targeted precision in how we understand and treat the brain. Recent advanced functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, studies have identified 3 distinct neurobiological subtypes of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Yeah. The imaging shows that the brains of individuals with ADHD don't all look the same. They have different patterns of neural connectivity. And crucially, one of these 3 subtypes represents a much more extreme, treatment-resistant form of the condition.
Which means the medical community can finally stop treating ADHD as a single monolith.
Exactly.
If a doctor knows exactly which neural subtype a patient has based on a brain scan, they can tailor the pharmaceutical or behavioral intervention to target those specific neural pathways. It's hyper-targeted precision medicine.
It is.
And we were seeing this exact same targeted approach applied to rare genetic disorders, too.
Yes, there's a decades-old drug called DFMO, which was originally developed and used to treat African sleeping sickness caused by parasites.
Okay.
But researchers recently discovered that the molecular mechanism of DFMO directly interacts with polyamine pathways in human cells. It is now showing incredible promise in clinical trials for children with an ultra-rare, devastating genetic disorder called Bachmann-Bupp syndrome, or BABS, which causes severe neurological symptoms and hair loss. The drug appears to bypass the genetic anomaly and restore normal cellular function.
It is always amazing when an old, cheap drug finds a new, highly complex, life-saving purpose. And that brings us to rapamycin. This is an immunosuppressant drug originally discovered in the soil of Easter Island.
Right.
It is currently very popular in the longevity enthusiast community, people trying to hack their biology to live past 100. But new physiological research is showing it has surprising significant impacts on exercise performance.
It is a fascinating intersection of anti-aging research and athletic optimization. The mechanism here involves a cellular protein called mTOR, which acts as a central regulator of metabolism and cell growth.
Okay.
Rapamycin inhibits mTOR. What scientists are discovering is that by carefully modulating this pathway, rapamycin can actually alter how muscle fibers respond to physical stress and exercise, potentially enhancing endurance and recovery.
That's wild.
It opens up a whole new field of study on how we can chemically precisely enhance baseline human performance.
With drugs like rapamycin optimizing physical exercise and DFMO reversing rare genetics and new enzyme-inhibiting pills for male birth control, are we moving toward an era where human biology is entirely customizable on demand?
It certainly looks that way.
And more importantly, what are the ethical lines we shouldn't cross when we start treating the human body like a software program we can just patch and upgrade?
That is the precipice we are standing on. We are transitioning from medicine as a tool solely for healing the sick to medicine as a tool for engineering the human experience.
Yeah.
The ethical lines regarding enhancement versus therapy are currently incredibly blurry. But if you think the ethical dilemmas in biological hacking are complex, we need to look at what is happening right now in the digital and artificial intelligence realms.
Wow, absolutely.
Those ethical dilemmas aren't just theoretical. They're currently exploding in federal courtrooms.
Which brings us to segment 4, the tech and AI battlefield. And there is no bigger battlefield right now than the lawsuit between 2 of the most powerful men in the technology sector, Elon Musk and Sam Altman. They are taking their incredibly toxic, long-standing feud to court over the future of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT.
To view this as just a billionaire squabble is a mistake. This lawsuit represents the fundamental ideological schism at the heart of the AI industry regarding how we achieve artificial general intelligence, or AGI, meaning an AI system that is smarter than humans at every cognitive task.
Okay.
OpenAI was originally founded as a nonprofit, open-source research lab dedicated to building AGI safely for the benefit of humanity. Elon Musk co-founded it with that premise.
But then OpenAI created a capped-for-profit subsidiary to raise the billions of dollars needed for computing power, and things shifted dramatically.
Exactly. On one side of the lawsuit, you have CEO Sam Altman representing the accelerationist viewpoint. This philosophy pushes for rapid, aggressive technological advancement, arguing that the best way to make AI safe is to deploy it commercially, let society test it, and iterate on safety protocols in real time.
Move fast and break things.
Right. On the other side, you have Elon Musk, representing a viewpoint closer to effective altruism. Musk is arguing in court that OpenAI has completely abandoned its original nonprofit humanitarian mission in pursuit of massive profits with Microsoft.
Okay.
He's pushing for much stricter open-source safety regulations and foundational oversight before the models become too powerful to control.
It's the classic Silicon Valley tension, right? Move fast and break things versus let's not accidentally build the Terminator.
Pretty much.
But the ruling on this lawsuit is going to set the foundational legal precedent for how humanity governs artificial intelligence moving forward.
The court's findings on intellectual property, corporate governance, and fiduciary responsibility in AI will lay the legal foundation for future regulations globally. And the urgency of establishing this governance is highlighted by how incredibly fast AI is being deployed in high-stakes life-or-death environments.
Yeah.
For instance, recent reporting reveals that Google is actively expanding the United States Pentagon's access to its advanced AI technologies for military applications.
Which is a huge controversial shift in Silicon Valley culture, especially because just recently another major AI company, Anthropic, specifically and publicly refused to provide their technology to the military, citing ethical concerns about autonomous weapons.
What's fascinating here is the contrast in how different regions and entities are trying to control tech power. It is jarring.
Yeah, it is.
While the U.S. military is actively integrating commercial AI into its defense infrastructure to maintain a tactical, geopolitical edge against adversaries, other countries are taking a completely different approach, focusing entirely on economic regulation of these massive tech monopolies.
Look at Australia. The Australian government is implementing the News Bargaining Incentive, or NBI. It forces big tech giants, specifically Meta, Google, and TikTok, to pay a mandatory 2.25% tax on their local revenues.
Right.
And that money is earmarked specifically to fund local Australian journalism.
It is an aggressive, pioneering legislative move to secure sustainable funding for a media industry that has been financially decimated over the last decade by the digital advertising duopoly of Google and Meta.
It is.
It's a bold national experiment in forcing platforms to pay for the journalistic content that keeps their users engaged and scrolling.
And Europe isn't holding back either. Meta has just been formally charged by the European Union under the Digital Services Act for failing to keep young children off of platforms like Instagram and Facebook.
Yep.
European regulators are citing the severe, documented negative impacts on youth mental health and are demanding strict, verifiable age-gating technology.
It represents a global, synchronized tightening of the regulatory leash on these platforms.
Yeah.
Governments are finally realizing the societal cost of unregulated social media. But managing the real world, human impact of this technology is proving incredibly messy and unpredictable.
Messy is an understatement.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the absolute bizarre reality of wearable tech hitting the real world. Meta recently fired over 1,000 content moderation workers in Kenya, Africa. Why? Because some of these moderators reported witnessing users of Meta's new smart glasses engaging in explicit sexual acts.
It is a profound, almost dystopian demonstration of the privacy nightmares created by ubiquitous wearable cameras. To train their AI systems and monitor for safety, Meta requires human moderators to review snippets of flagged footage captured by these glasses.
Which means someone is watching.
Exactly. When technology moves from our desks to our pockets to sitting directly on our faces recording our first-person perspective, the boundary between intimate private life and captured corporate data completely dissolves. The human moderators in Kenya were caught in the psychological crossfire of this unrestricted data flow.
It is just wild to think that a pair of sunglasses is creating international labor disputes over explicit content in Africa.
It really is.
But while we are dealing with the messy, deeply human reality of smart glasses, the underlying physics of technology is leaping straight into sci-fi territory. Physicists just successfully teleported a photon state across 270 meters in open air.
Quantum teleportation over that distance through the turbulent atmosphere is a stunning breakthrough in quantum mechanics. To be completely clear, they aren't beaming physical matter like a Star Trek transporter.
Right.
They are utilizing a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. When two photons are entangled, measuring the state of one instantly determines the state of the other, regardless of the distance separating them.
Wow.
The scientists essentially transfer the exact quantum state, the informational properties, of one photon to a distant photon instantly without the information ever traveling through the space in between.
That is the foundation for a completely unhackable, ultra-secure quantum internet, because if anyone tries to intercept the information, the entanglement breaks, and you immediately know you've been hacked. But here's my question. If tech giants are already embedding AI into Pentagon military applications, and we are literally teleporting quantum information through the open air, hasn't the ship already sailed on the safety regulations that Elon Musk is suing over? Are we trying to put the genie back in the bottle after it's already built a quantum network?
The genie is certainly out of the bottle, but the argument from safety advocates is about steering the genie, not putting it back.
Okay.
The fact that the technology is advancing so rapidly into autonomous defense networks, into unhackable quantum communications, is exactly why advocates argue we need robust international governance structures now. We need them before these systems become completely autonomous and integrated into our infrastructure beyond our ability to comprehend or control them.
That makes a lot of sense.
But while we struggle to govern AI and data here on Earth, our technological reach is simultaneously expanding deep into the solar system and beyond.
And that leads us to our final segment today. Reaching for the cosmos. The sheer scale, the physical engineering of what humanity is doing in space right now is just breathtaking.
It is.
Let's start with the moon. NASA's Artemis II Orion capsule successfully returned to Florida after its lunar mission.
This was a critical, high-stakes test flight. The capsule traveled 1.4 million miles, swinging around the moon and returning to Earth, completely uncrewed.
Wow.
The mission was designed to rigorously validate all the life support, navigation, and extreme heat reentry systems before we put humans on board. But what was truly groundbreaking from a technological standpoint was its communication system.
Right?
They utilized optical laser communications to beam 484 gigabytes of high-definition data back to Earth in just 10 days.
Which is a massive upgrade from the old radio frequency systems we've used since the Apollo era. It's like going from dial-up internet to gigabit fiber, but across the void of space. To pull that off, they basically had to hit a moving receiver on Earth with a laser pointer from hundreds of thousands of miles away, while both the Earth and the spacecraft were traveling at thousands of miles an hour.
It is an incredible engineering feat.
And the momentum of the Artemis program isn't slowing down. The core stage of the Artemis III space launch system, the massive SLS rocket, has arrived at the Kennedy Space Center, prepping for a 2027 launch. And that is the mission that aims to actually put human boots back on the lunar surface.
And international collaboration is the bedrock of this new era of space exploration. We also received news that Canadian astronaut Josh Kutrick is finally set to fly to the International Space Station, the ISS.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, his mission had faced severe, frustrating delays due to the ongoing engineering mishaps with the Boeing Starliner capsule program. But his upcoming flight underscores the immense patience and resilience required in modern space exploration.
But getting to the moon or the ISS is just the stepping stone. NASA is looking at Mars, and to get there, we need better engines.
We do.
The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, based in California, just successfully tested a next-generation lithium-fed magnetoplasma dynamic thruster. That is a mouthful, an MPD thruster.
Yes, and the engineering numbers on this are phenomenal. Traditional rockets use chemical explosions to push mass out the back, which requires carrying massive, heavy tanks of fuel.
Right.
This MPD thruster is an electric propulsion prototype. It uses magnetic fields to accelerate lithium plasma, the superheated fourth state of matter, out of the exhaust at incredible speeds.
Wow.
This specific prototype reached 120 kilowatts of power in testing. That is more than 25 times the power of the current ion thrusters we use on deep space probes. By electromagnetically accelerating plasma, they can achieve incredible thrust efficiency, drastically reducing the amount of heavy propellant a ship needs to carry.
And they eventually want to scale this technology up to a full megawatt for human missions to Mars, cutting the travel time down significantly.
That's the goal.
But keeping humans alive on a multi-year trip to Mars isn't just about plasma physics, it's about food. Astronaut Don Pettit is currently on the ISS running a fascinating botanical experiment with the space potato he lovingly named Sputnik.
It's a fantastic name. But the underlying science of Sputnik is vital to our survival as a multiplanetary species. Testing microgravity agriculture is a non-negotiable prerequisite for deep space travel.
Right, you can't just order takeout.
Exactly. You physically cannot pack enough heavy, freeze-dried meals for a 3-year Mars mission. The rocket would be too heavy to launch. You have to be able to reliably grow dense calories in transit and eventually on the Martian surface using recycled water and artificial light.
It is so funny to think about relying on a potato named Sputnik to get us to Mars, especially when you juxtapose it against the much more apocalyptic-sounding space missions we are launching.
Oh, definitely.
Exploration Labs, a private aerospace company, just announced the Apophis EX mission.
This is a fascinating commercial venture into the fields of planetary defense. Apophis is a massive near-Earth asteroid that poses a potential, albeit statistically small, hazard of impacting our planet in the future.
Okay.
Exploration Labs is planning a deep space rideshare mission to rendezvous with Apophis when it makes a close pass by Earth. The goal is specifically to test advanced monitoring hardware and potential kinetic deflection technologies.
It's basically an insurance policy for planet Earth, funded by private capital. If we ever see an asteroid heading right for us, we need to know exactly how to push it off course.
Yes.
And the commercial space race is booming in other ways closer to home. Europe's powerful new heavy-lift Ariane 6 rocket is scheduled to launch 32 Amazon Kuiper Internet satellites into low Earth orbit. This is Amazon's direct challenge to SpaceX's Starlink network.
The rapid industrialization and commercialization of low Earth orbit is happening at a blistering pace. It brings up massive questions about space debris and orbital traffic management.
It really does.
But while corporations build internet networks in our own planetary backyard, our most advanced telescopes are looking back to the literal dawn of time.
Yeah.
Using the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST, and the Chandra X-ray Observatory, astronomers found an X-ray dot emitting radiation from 11.8 billion light-years away.
11.8 billion years in the past. That is mind-numbing to even conceptualize. The universe is only about 13.8 billion years old.
Right.
And this tiny dot of radiation is helping astronomers solve the mystery of these little red dots that the Webb telescope has been finding everywhere in the early universe.
Right. Astronomers have been deeply puzzled by these tiny, incredibly bright red objects. They were too small to be normal galaxies, but too bright to be normal stars.
So what are they?
The detection of high-energy X-rays from this specific dot by the Chandra Observatory strongly suggests that these aren't just dense star clusters. They're likely what theoretical physicists call black hole stars.
Okay, my brain just broke. What is a black hole star?
The working theory is that these are supermassive black holes nestled deep within impossibly dense, thick clouds of primordial gas.
Okay.
The gas is falling into the black hole, heating up, and emitting massive amounts of light. But the outer layers of the gas cloud obscure the normal visible light, only letting the red wavelengths and X-rays escape.
Wow.
It represents a crucial, previously missing transition phase in the early universe, showing us exactly how the first supermassive black holes grew so large, so fast.
It really bends the mind. Speaking of bending things, the European Space Agency's Euclid Space Telescope has launched a massive citizen science project where they are literally crowdsourcing the hunt for space-time warps.
This is the ultimate democratization of astrophysics. Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity predicts that massive objects like giant clusters of galaxies have such intense gravity that they actually bend the fabric of space and time around them. When light from a distant galaxy travels through that warped space, it acts like a magnifying glass, stretching and distorting the image of the galaxy into arcs or rings. This is called gravitational lensing.
So they're asking the public to help find these.
Exactly. By releasing these massive raw image datasets to the public, everyday citizens can log on and help identify these space-time warps. Mapping these lenses is the only way we can map the distribution of dark matter in the universe, since dark matter doesn't emit light, but it does have gravity.
Okay, I have to ask a wild question here.
Go for it.
Because alongside all this rigorous astrophysics, there is an article circulating where a theoretical physicist has published a claim that humans will mathematically be able to travel backward in time within just 3 years.
Oh, I saw that.
Now, assuming for a second that isn't just science fiction, if scientists are seriously predicting backward time travel using quantum mechanics, and we are actively crowdsourcing the search for actual warps in the fabric of space-time, does that fundamentally change our motivation to build rockets?
That's a deep question.
Why spend a decade building a massive rocket and years growing space potatoes to fly to Mars if we might soon figure out how to just bend space and time to get there instantly?
It is a profound, provocative thought. But science is a rigorous process of incremental validation. A theoretical mathematical claim about time travel, rooted in highly speculative, fringe interpretations of quantum mechanics, is vastly different from the hard engineering reality of building a 120-kilowatt plasma thruster.
Yeah, that's true.
We build the rockets and we test the thrusters because we know the classical physics of propulsion works in our macro reality. It is tangible, but the pursuit of understanding space-time warps, gravitational lensing, and quantum entanglement pushes the theoretical boundaries of what our future macro reality might look like centuries from now.
So we do both.
Exactly. We have to pursue the practical engineering of today and the profound physics of tomorrow simultaneously. One ensures our survival, the other ensures our evolution.
That is an incredible way to frame it, the practical and the profound. Well, that brings our deep dive to a close today. We have covered an unbelievable amount of ground.
We really have.
We started with the literal physical tearing of the Juan de Fuca plate beneath the Pacific Northwest and the high-stakes geopolitical chess games over oil cartels and blocked shipping routes in the Middle East.
Yeah.
We explored the bizarre, resilient biology of extreme ship goo in the Great Lakes and the paradigm-shifting new frontiers of precision medicine, from male birth control to longevity drugs.
It's all connected.
And we pushed all the way out to 120 kilowatt plasma engines, the messy reality of AI governance, and the mysterious black hole stars at the very edge of the observable universe.
It truly is a vast, interconnected spectrum of human endeavor and scientific discovery.
To you, the listener, thank you for taking the time to join us on this expansive journey. It is so easy to scroll through the daily news and see a chaotic, fragmented world. But when you zoom out and really look at the mechanisms behind the headlines, you see how deeply interconnected all these fields of study truly are. The exact same radar satellites tracking our sinking cities are launched by the rockets, pushing us toward a multi-planetary future on Mars.
Right.
The chemical analysis defining our future hyper-targeted medicines is the exact same scientific discipline helping us understand how 2,000-year-old Roman shipwrecks navigated the Mediterranean.
And that leads to a final thought I want to leave you with. We are currently building and using the most advanced tools in human history, from artificial general intelligence algorithms to the James Webb Space Telescope, to look as far outward into the universe as physically possible.
Yeah.
But ultimately, whether it's understanding the fragility of our climate, governing the ethics of AI, or tracing the path of ancient Roman engineers, these tools are forcing us to look inward. They are holding up a mirror. They are asking us, now that we have the technological power to alter our own biology, to reshape our planet, and perhaps even understand the fabric of time itself, what kind of species do we actually want to be?
What kind of species do we actually want to be? I love that. When we started today, we talked about how comforting it is to look at a static map of the world with all those neat permanent borders drawn in black ink.
Right.
But the reality is that the map is constantly shifting. The tectonic plates are tearing, the geopolitical alliances are fluid, and the boundaries of human biology and deep space are expanding every single day. The map isn't static, and neither are we. Keep questioning the boundaries, keep digging into the data, and we will see you next time.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Debate. Imagine you're renovating a historic house. You walk in, look around, and you see this massive structural load-bearing wall right in the middle of the living room.
Right, the kind of wall you really shouldn't touch.
Exactly. Now, if you take a sledgehammer and knock it down, you get a beautiful, modern, open floor plan that completely adapts to how you want to live today.
But if you mess up the math, the entire roof comes crashing down on your head.
Spot on. And right now, we are watching the architects of the global economy essentially swing the sledgehammer. We are witnessing an unprecedented geopolitical earthquake right now.
Yeah, triggered specifically by the United Arab Emirates.
Right. Their historic decision to exit OPEC and the broader OPEC Plus alliance, which, goes into full effect on May 1, 2026. And by making this move, they are basically taking a sledgehammer to that load-bearing wall of the global oil economy.
It's important to note that it's not just the UAE acting in a vacuum, though. This structural dismantling is happening while oil prices are violently spiking to $119 a barrel.
Which is just a massive shock to the system.
It really is. And that price shock is being driven by the escalating U.S.-Israel conflict with Iran, coupled with the extended blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which, honestly, is the absolute worst place on the planet for a bottleneck.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, considering it handles 25% of the world's global crude trade, closing it down is catastrophic.
Does the fracturing of traditional collective economic blocs, from massive cartels like OPEC all the way down to regional political alliances, represent a necessary, rational pivot towards strategic national autonomy in a multipolar world?
Or conversely, does it signal a dangerous descent into global economic volatility and, deep inequality?
Right. I'll be taking the position that rigid collective agreements inherently stifle economic productivity. The shift toward individual national sovereignty, which is perfectly illustrated by the UAE's exit and the rapid adaptation of new global supply chains, is a necessary Darwinian evolution for global resilience.
And I'll argue that the collapse of collective cooperation combined with the active weaponization of global trade routes deeply destabilizes the world economy. It disproportionately harms vulnerable developing nations and replaces thoughtfully managed markets with a dangerous zero-sum volatility.
A volatility where the biggest military powers dictate the terms of survival, essentially.
Exactly.
Well, let's start with the UAE's departure from OPEC, because it really serves as the perfect microcosm of this entire shift. The global economy has simply outgrown these mid-20th century cartels and rigid blocks.
You think they're completely obsolete at this point?
I really do. Just look at the economic realism driving the Emirates right now. They actually have the physical and infrastructural capacity to produce 4.8 million barrels of oil per day. Yet under OPEC's collective quotas, they were artificially capped at around 3.2 to 3.6 million barrels.
Right, because OPEC functions as a cartel. By limiting the global supply of oil, they keep the price per barrel artificially high.
Which is supposed to help everyone.
Theoretically, yes. It theoretically benefits all the member nations by ensuring a steady stream of revenue.
Theoretically, sure. But by exiting the cartel and seeking to hit 5 million barrels per day by 2027, the UAE is simply prioritizing its own sovereign national interests. They want to capitalize on their natural resources right now.
To fund their own projects.
As much as they can to aggressively fund their domestic transition to renewable energy. They need that capital to build their future. Furthermore, this individualism is a highly rational response to immediate existential security threats.
You're talking about the regional conflicts.
Yeah, we saw Iranian drone strikes targeting the region over the last few years, and collective organizations like OPEC fundamentally failed to shield Abu Dhabi from those geopolitical realities. When the collective fails to protect you, well, sovereignty is your only logical recourse.
See, the problem with prioritizing narrow national sovereignty over institutional stability is that it creates systemic risk. It creates devastating collateral damage for everyone else. By abandoning these collective frameworks, the UAE is setting off a dangerous chain reaction.
How so?
You mentioned OPEC's quota system. That wasn't just about enriching the top producers. It provided a necessary price floor that stabilized economies heavily reliant on oil exports.
Wait, let me pause you right there, because I think this is a crucial point to unpack for our audience. You mentioned this threatens other nations, specifically African producers.
Yes, absolutely.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. How does Abu Dhabi deciding to pump more of its own oil directly defund, say, a public program or hospital in Angola?
It's a vital question, and it really comes down to fiscal break-even points. Nations like Angola or Nigeria, they don't have the massively diversified sovereign wealth funds that the UAE has built up over decades.
Right. Their economies are much more fragile.
Exactly. Their national budgets, which pay for schools, hospitals, basic infrastructure, are calculated based on oil staying above a certain price per barrel. When a giant like the UAE leaves OPEC and starts flooding the market with millions of extra barrels to fund its own green transition, the global supply goes up.
And the price drops.
And eventually the baseline price floor cracks. The UAE's departure actively weakens the cohesion of OPEC, directly threatening those African producers whose fiscal stability and social safety nets depend entirely on collective price management.
It pulls the rug out from under them.
Yes. You call it a necessary evolution? I call it a global crisis. We are stripping away the shock absorbers of the global economy right as we hit the roughest terrain.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on what those shock absorbers were actually doing. OPEC's artificially managed markets weren't really protecting the global economy. I mean, they were stifling global productivity.
Stifling productivity by stabilizing prices?
Think of OPEC like an outdated corporate monopoly. Imagine a massive tech giant that has a legacy product, and they intentionally suppress a competitor's innovative new technology just to keep their old product profitable. By forcing a nation like the UAE to artificially suppress its own economic engine during a massive global energy crunch, well, that agreement proves it is inherently obsolete.
But it kept the market predictable.
At the cost of agility. By distancing itself from the Saudi-led regional order, the UAE is allowing itself to pursue a much more agile strategy, even exploring alignments with emerging economic powerhouses like the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They are looking at a multipolar world and deciding that agility is far more valuable than rigid compliance to a cartel that limits their potential.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Agility is a fantastic buzzword for corporate boardrooms, but in geopolitics, this so-called agility is producing catastrophic volatility.
Volatility is just the market repricing risk, though.
But the human cost is massive. The current oil spike to $119 a barrel absolutely proves the danger of this fragmentation. Right now, the global market is in total chaos. We have the United States extending a blockade on uranium ports.
Yeah, and Tehran retaliating.
Exactly, by actively obstructing commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, because OPEC is fracturing and there is no unified collective response to stabilize the market, the price is just skyrocketing.
But isn't that just a temporary price shock due to the conflict? Markets always price in war.
It's not temporary if the underlying structural stability is gone. And this isn't abstract economic theory. This volatility directly drives up costs for everyday citizens across the entire planet. Look at Europe right now.
The energy crisis there is brutal, yeah.
Because energy prices are so astronomically high, EU nations are actually being forced to raise wage taxes to decade highs. Why? Because they have to subsidize energy for their citizens and finance social support systems that are buckling under the weight of inflation.
Which slows down the economy even further.
Exactly. So they tax wages, which kills growth. Meanwhile, look at the US. We are seeing the very real, looming threat of stagflation.
Let's define that for a second, just to be precise. Stagflation is that brutal economic cocktail where you have stagnant economic growth, high unemployment, and high inflation all hitting at the exact same time, correct?
Yes, exactly. It's a central banker's worst nightmare because the tools to fix inflation usually hurt employment and vice versa, and it is a direct consequence of unmanaged compounding energy shocks.
But those shocks are catalysts for change.
When major players abandon the collective table, you don't get innovation. You get a free-for-all that crushes the middle and lower classes globally, from the West to the developing world.
But that same high price of oil that is crushing European wages is exactly the financial catalyst driving incredible adaptation. You are looking at the friction, but you are missing the evolution that the friction forces.
Evolution? It's chaos. Markets naturally adapt to blockades and bottlenecks. In fact, geopolitical pressure forces rapid diversification. So let's connect the dots here and look at how this exact friction is fundamentally reshaping global supply chains and maritime trade.
You mean how it's breaking them?
I mean how it's upgrading them. Take China's response to the Middle East tensions. Because of traditional fossil fuel routes through Hormuz are under threat, Chinese solar exports doubled to a record 68 gigawatts in a single month. In March alone.
Which is a massive jump. Right. The sheer cost of oil forced a massive acceleration toward renewables. Or look at the critical mineral supply chain. China's Zhejiang Huayu Cobalt just successfully exported its first massive shipment of lithium salt from Zimbabwe.
Okay, but why does that specifically matter in this context?
Because when traditional Western-patrolled shipping lanes are choked by military powers, nations are forced to build entirely new overland or alternative maritime corridors in the global south. The blockade in Hormuz is effectively acting as an accelerant. It is permanently removing Western powers as the necessary middlemen and breaking the world's dependency on a single volatile region.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that what you are describing is not a peaceful, market-driven adaptation? It is the active weaponization of global trade.
Weaponization?
Yes. These aren't organic market shifts. These are superpowers choking global lifelines to assert dominance.
Walk me through that. How is a lithium shipment from Zimbabwe weaponization?
The lithium shipment is the reaction to the weaponization. Look at the mechanisms being deployed right now. In the source material, the United States is proposing what they call the Maritime Freedom Construct.
Right, the new naval initiative.
Now, the name sounds incredibly noble, but how does it actually work?
It is a coordinated naval initiative to control the Strait of Hormuz that explicitly, by design, excludes Russia and China. This isn't about protecting free trade for the world.
You're saying it's exclusionary on purpose?
It is about monopolizing a strategic choke point to starve out geopolitical rivals. And the retaliation is spreading to other hemispheres. The US and China are now openly clashing over the Panama Canal. China is actively being accused of detaining Panama-flagged vessels to undermine sovereignty and politicize maritime trade.
So you see this as a militarization of logistics?
Exactly. We are watching the militarization of the world's most critical logistical arteries. When major powers use trade routes as weapons, it doesn't foster healthy diversification like you're suggesting.
What does it do then?
It forces smaller nations into devastating economic crossfires and fractures the global economy into isolated, hostile spheres. If you aren't part of the U.S. naval construct, or you aren't aligned with Beijing's port authorities, your economy grinds to a halt.
I understand the concern about militarization, and the Panama Canal situation is definitely tense. But I firmly maintain that the dismantling of this old unipolar dominance is actually benefiting smaller nations in the long run. They are no longer trapped in a binary Cold War-style paradigm.
I just don't see how getting caught in an economic crossfire benefits them at all.
Because they are seeking out new, pragmatic partnerships based on their own sovereign needs, rather than historical dictates. Look at the political shifts happening across Africa. Mali turning to Russia for security partnerships is a perfect example.
Which is a highly controversial move.
Now, one might critique the specific partner, sure, but the mechanism is a nation rejecting traditional Western oversight in favor of its own sovereign choices. For decades, these nations were told exactly who they could trade with, what fiscal policies they had to adopt, and how they could govern themselves by Western institutions. Now, they have options.
But do they really have options or just different pressures?
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes smaller nations lack agency. Aren't these countries simply shopping in a more competitive geopolitical marketplace? They are actively leveraging the competition between the US, China, and Russia.
You think they're playing the superpowers against each other?
Yeah, they can go to Beijing for infrastructure, Washington for technology, and Moscow for security, getting better deals on their own terms.
I come at it from a different way. Because the reality on the ground strongly refutes the idea that smaller nations are benefiting from this so-called competitive marketplace. Let's look at Latin America and the Caribbean.
Okay, let's look at that region.
The fracturing of CARICOM, the Caribbean community, serves as prime, tragic evidence of this. This isn't about agency, it's about sheer coercion. We are seeing intense U.S. pressure right now via what's being called the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine.
For our listeners who might have missed the nuances of that, the Trump corollary essentially refers to modern U.S. policies pressuring Western Hemisphere nations to explicitly exclude Chinese investment in infrastructure projects, right? Effectively forcing them to pick sides.
Spot on. It uses economic threats to mandate political alignment, and that external pressure is actively dismantling their regional solidarity.
Because it pits neighbors against each other.
When you force a small island nation to reject billions in foreign investment just to appease a northern superpower, you aren't giving them choices, you are cornering them. And look at how this plays out in regional diplomacy.
Right.
We recently saw a deeply provocative incident where Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez showed up to a CARICOM meeting wearing a map brooch. But this wasn't just jewelry. The map on the brooch literally claimed Guyana's Essequibo region as Venezuelan territory.
Right, essentially erasing Guyana's borders right to their face at a diplomatic summit.
Yes, this brooch diplomacy isn't some quirky geopolitical footnote. It is a blatant, aggressive assertion of dominance that exploits the very fractures created by external superpower pressure. Venezuela feels emboldened because the traditional collective security frameworks are eroding.
So you're saying the loss of the collective empowers regional bullies?
It is tearing apart regional unity. Smaller nations in the global south are not empowered actors shopping for better deals. Their collective bargaining power is being systematically destroyed, turning them into pawns in a brutal zero-sum game.
Yet, that destruction of the old collective bargaining power is exactly what forces evolution. The system has to break to be rebuilt. To summarize my position today, The transition toward national autonomy and shifting alliances is undeniably turbulent.
Very turbulent.
The restructuring of the global economy always is. But the UAE's exit from OPEC, the bypassing of traditional maritime choke points in favor of new corridors, and the aggressive pursuit of new strategic partnerships represent a massive, necessary market correction. It breaks obsolete, mid-century cartels that have artificially constrained productivity.
And at a massive cost.
But by forcing nations to act in their own sovereign interests, we are accelerating economic adaptation, driving the funding of green energy transitions, and permanently breaking the complacency of the old unipolar world order.
And to summarize my perspective, the dismantling of these collective frameworks and the aggressive weaponization of international trade routes replaces managed stability with terrifying chaos. When nations abandon institutions like OPEC to maximize short-term sovereign wealth, the collateral damage is catastrophic.
You see it as inherently destructive.
We are seeing soaring inflation, the threat of global stagflation, and the systematic fracturing of regional blocs like CARICOM. Developing nations across Latin America, Africa, and beyond are being stripped of their collective protections and left totally exposed to the brutal, unforgiving realities of great power competition.
Well, while we clearly view the consequences through very different lenses, I think we both fundamentally agree on one core truth here. The era of uncontested globalization and rigid collective blocs, like the classic iteration of OPEC, is permanently over. The global economy will never look the way it did in 2019 again.
No, it absolutely won't.
The current geopolitical conflicts, from the shores of the Persian Gulf to the locks of the Panama Canal, are permanently redrawing the global economic map.
Yes, that convergence is absolutely undeniable. The institutions that govern the latter half of the 20th century are fracturing under the weight of 21st century multipolarity. The map is being redrawn, and it is being redrawn in real time.
Often messily.
Very messily, often through force, economic coercion, and rapidly shifting allegiances.
It highlights the sheer complexity of navigating a multipolar world, where the aggressive pursuit of national interests inevitably collides with our deep, undeniable global interconnectedness. The long-term impacts of the UAE's historic exit from OPEC and the ongoing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz will absolutely require our continued observation of the source material.
There's definitely much more to explore as this develops.
We leave it to you, the listener, to weigh the merits of strategic national autonomy against the protective value of collective stability. But as you watch the news unfold this week, ask yourself, when the architects of the global economy knock down that load-bearing wall, are we building a more resilient future, or are we just waiting for the roof to collapse?
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.